everybody. I wanted to do a quick video to introduce a whole idea of behavior. So we talk about behaviors being those that an organism just knows what to do, those that are written in the genes, that are in those genetic material that are inherited from their parents, and they inherit them from their parents, and so forth. So if it is an instinct means an innate behavior, one that is inherited. And that concept is a little harder for us to understand because as human mammals, we rely more on our ability to learn. However, we have several instincts of our own. So think about what behaviors does a little itty bitty baby do that they didn't even know they didn't learn what to do. And so some of those would be like sucking or suckling. Many babies, even you'll find them on an ultrasound sucking their thumb. The ability to kind of root and know where to find milk. Babies also naturally will verbalize and make noise. They will cry when they're trying to communicate that they're unhappy or they are in need of something. They, think about those instincts, the grasping of an object or a hand in their hand. So all of those are behaviors that you didn't learn as a baby. No one taught you those, but you were born with. So now let's think about a spider. So baby spiders don't know their mom. They don't know their dad. So they have to kind of rely on instinct. So thinking about spinning the web or what you're going to eat or how you're going to attract a mate or, being able to carry out your life processes without learning them. Think about a fish. Think about even plants. How in the world do they know which way to grow in order to get their sunlight for photosynthesis? How does a little tiny amoeba know how to get its food? It doesn't have a brain, but we know that all of these behaviors are written in DNA. So let's talk a little bit about those. So you have a PowerPoint or a Google slideshow that is posted to Canvas. You will go through that and take notes, and then these are supplemental notes that go with that. So I'm just going to kind of go over some of those concepts. Okay, so innate behavior. There's different descriptions for this. So we said they're instincts. You just were born knowing what to do. It is genetically determined behavior. So we also call them behavioral adaptations. So now is probably a good time to talk about this word or remind you of what that means. So adaptations are traits that are inherited that are going to increase the survival of an organism in a particular environment. So those organisms that have, or those in a particular species that have certain adaptations will have a better chance of growing and developing and to adulthood or to sexual maturity to be able to then pass on those genes to the next generation. So adaptations can be behavioral, things you're born knowing what to do, that can then translate as success in your, for your success in your environment. Okay. So just going through some of those without an outline. So I want to first talk about taxis. It looks like taxis, like the car. Taxis is a behavior that causes an organism to orient and move toward or away from a stimulus. So it is the environmental cue is what it's going to respond to. So, for example, a euglena has an eye spot and has a flagellum. The flagellum is used for locomotion. The eye spot is not like our eye that we can see objects in depth. So it would be like you closing your eyes and you can tell if someone turns on the light or off the light. You can tell if you're through your eyelid, if you're facing light or darkness. And that's what an eye spot is like. So they have some of these photoreceptor kind of cells. And so we know about the euglena is it's photosynthetic. It has chlorophyll, so it's kind of algae-like, but also it's like a protozoan too. And so it can consume energy, but it also can make its own food. So it needs to be able to know where the light is, and that's what it uses its eye spot for. So if it's moving towards the light, then that's called positive, okay, because it's moving to the environmental stimulus. And because light, photo, means light, taxis. If you were moving away from the light, it would be negative phototaxis. Okay, so that's taxis. The next one is how plants also orient to the light or to gravity or to an object, and that is tropism. This is plant taxis. So only plants, and so if this plant is growing towards light, it's called phototropism. I'm looking at a tree out here, and it's been growing towards where there is more direct sunlight. So you'll notice that with plants in a window, they'll start growing more on one side, and you'll have to kind of turn them around, and then they'll start growing on the other side. This is all controlled by plant hormones. So there's not a nervous system. Like we utilize our nervous system and our muscular system to be able to move. For that euglena earlier, it doesn't have muscles, but what it does have is it uses ATP as an energy source to get that whip, that flagellum moving. So for them, yes, they use ATP, but also they're using hormones that will cause their cells to do certain things. Okay, if we look at the roots of this plant, okay, so let's say that we planted this seed. We know the first part of an embryo from a plant to emerge from a seed is actually the roots. And the roots have to grow down towards gravity in order to obtain water. And so after it can start supplying the rest of it with water, it can start breaking out of that seed. So this is called gravity or geotropism, when the roots are growing downward. You can also see hydrotropism if it's going towards water. And then as the little shoot comes up, we know that it's going to react to the light. A third type of tropism is one that you see. Actually, I see it on my house. So here's a brick wall. And let's see, like this. And you will see a plant kind of growing up and climbing up the base of our house. And this is English ivy. It's not poison ivy, but what it does is it attaches to the wall, its roots, and it climbs up. And this is called thigmotropism. And so it's when it reacts to that hard surface and it grabs on and it's able to climb up. And that's how you'll see poison ivy wrapping around a tree, or kudzu actually kind of climb up over a plant so it can compete for sunlight. So that's tropism. Okay. Communication is interesting because we know that communication is innate. How we learn the language is learned for us. But putting humans aside, if we talk about communication, some animals will urinate or poop to communicate. They may hiss, their hair may bristle up. You have verbal and nonverbal types of communication that are not learned. You have blinking of lights for a firefly. There are all types of ways. Actually, Even white-tailed deer, the males will take their antlers and they'll scrape on a tree to tell a female that they're there. Females can hear the clashing of antlers of two males that are fighting, and she knows that that means that there are males there who may want to reproduce with her. So there's all types of communications, and the communication can be defense, for courtship, for trying to attract a mate, which is innate, for group interactions with the division of labor with jobs. But for whatever it is, there is communication is definitely innate. Now let's talk a little bit about people. People having the ability to verbalize and to be able to communicate that way through word, through speech. That is innate. However, we have to learn language, and that is the nurture part. So you'll hear with behavior there is nature versus nurture. And so with learning a language, the fact that we want to innately verbalize, that's our nature, that's written in our genes. But we have to learn a language, the specific semantics, and just learn about the linguistics of it all. That is learned, and that's nurture. So when you see nurture, it means the environment. When you see nature, it means it's the DNA, genetics. And you have a video that's on the slideshow that talks about how bees communicate, which is pretty cool. And they do these round and raggle dances to tell members of their group where food is located. And so watch that. It's really fascinating. And it's a lab that I actually had to do as a biology major at Chapel Hill. So it's really cool. Okay, that's communication. Also, I want to do torpor. Torpor is a state of a low metabolic state where you're almost in a coma. And what torpor is used for is to put you in that deep sleep so you can survive a period of undesirable kind of weather, or a period of time. So it could be drought. Estivation is to survive a period of drought, or it can be a very hot summer. And so we have frogs that do that. So there's a video that's on the slideshow that shows the water holding toad, and it's amazing what it does. So please watch that. We normally would watch all those in class and talk about them. But estivation is to help some of those animals that could potentially dry out because of drought. And so they estivate. Hibernation is the one you're probably more familiar with. And we know that some animals will hibernate to be able to survive a really cold or harsh winter. And if you do not have the ability to hibernate, maybe you migrate. So migration is also a type of innate behavior to survive. It's a seasonal change where you're able to survive the changes of weather. And so we usually think of different animals flying south, and they can reproduce maybe, and to survive a colder winter, and then they'll come back. But migration is definitely innate. Territoriality. This is defending your space. And so territorial behavior is also written in the genes. And so different animals defend their territories in different ways. We see that this in fish, we see it in various animals when they are establishing, kind of like marking their space where they raise their young, where they get their food, where their family is. And so one bird that we see a lot around here is the mockingbird. And a mockingbird will even dive towards your head of a human that might be close to their nest. It's just a gene cuts on and it just knows, do not get towards my nest, I will defend it. You can also mark those territories. So we know that animals, I think about my dog, every time it smells another male's scent, it wants to urinate next to it. So it's also trying to establish dominance. So there's different ways animals do this, and they can mark their territories and they can defend them. So that brings us to dominance hierarchies. Dominance hierarchies is sometimes what we call a pecking order in birds. It's where you have the dominant individual who usually has all breeding rights. In a lion pride, there's one male who is the dominant male who has the rights to mate with all the females. If something happens to him and he's removed, the next male will come in, and now he is the dominant male. If there are any females that are pregnant with the prior dominant male's cub, then it's not uncommon for them to miscarry those, or if they have those, that something can happen to those cubs because they're not the new dominant male's cubs. So dominance hierarchies actually are meant to reduce fighting in a social group, because everyone has a role. Or social position. Now, if you challenge someone that has a higher rank as you or role and you win, then you will many times take that social rank and you'll be able to move up. So we used to see this too when we would feed the ducks at Finch Park. So I would take our kids over to feed the ducks, and we noticed that when you throw bread out, the first ducks to move in were the dominant ones. And then you continuously feed them, and then the next group will come in. And there was a duck at the time, I called it the tumor-headed duck, and this had a growth on his head, and it was clearly the lowest on the totem pole. It was the lowest in the pecking order, and so we always felt sorry for it. And so I would usually send one of the kids over to kind of throw some bread to it because it was going to be the last one to eat. Maybe it's nature's way of trying to weed individuals out. Maybe, but we kind of felt sorry for it, and we would try to feed it too. But that's the dominance hierarchy. In theory, it's like a caste system of everybody knows their social position, whether we agree with it or not. In nature, it kind of helps keep the peace. Okay, circadian rhythm. There is a video in the slideshow that is fantastic, and it talks about this. Circadian rhythm is your 24-hour, and we're going to talk more just about people with this. Other animals also have set schedules. So they may be more active at night, nocturnal, they inherited that. Or they could be diurnal and they're active during the daytime. For humans, ours is set more on we have a hormone called melatonin that our pineal gland releases, and that kind of makes us sleepy. And then as that hormone decreases in concentration in our bloodstream, we start to wake up. And so we know that this is your 24-hour sleep wake cycle. It's also when you may get hungry, so your body gets on a certain cycle. We know now with COVID, all of our schedules are very screwed up, and we might be sleeping a lot later than we normally would during the school year, or like in the summer. We know that our schedules change, even on the weekend, and sometimes it takes a little while for you to get adjusted back, and you may have some insomnia because of it. But circadian rhythm is pretty fascinating. So if you are a third shift worker, your daytime is actually your nighttime, and your nighttime is your daytime. So your circadian rhythm has to be set. We have to do this to babies when they're born to kind of set their sleep and wake cycles. And sometimes it takes longer than others. So those are some key ones. I feel like I'm probably leaving some out. But those are some of the key and common innate behaviors. If I think of some others, I'll put it on the next video as we talk about learned behaviors. So have a nice weekend. I hope this helps you understand instinctive or innate behaviors.